And we're live. So welcome everyone to the stream. Kyle's already here with questions. Oh my gosh. He came in with a question. He doesn't even say hi. He's just like, hey, Mr. Preston, here's a question.
Let me see.
Yeah, he's full of anticipation for that new board.
Yeah, people are pretty excited for it, for sure. I mean, it's by far the best thing that's available, and at least in our hobby. So
that's very exciting.
Pretty well.
No, I can't wait to check it out.
So hold on, I gotta go to live comments. Okay, I see. So
yeah,
are you gonna ask the questions, or do I need to respond to the people in there?
We will pull them up for you so that you don't have to try and pay attention to that and talk to us.
Okay.
So we'll ask them and then we'll bring in their questions and mix them with ours and all that.
Okay, sounds good.
I thought I just turned off my sound. Come on, phone. There we go. And yeah, we like to give a few minutes for the I just got the notification now that we're live, so we give a 5-minute buffer.
Yeah, when we used to do, we put a thing on there, be starting at 6 and start streaming, and then remove it.
I need to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we just wrote a sign and put it on the camera, honestly, and turned off. and
That's a good idea.
Just coming at 6 p.m. and then you do it for 10 or 15 minutes, and people. That's how you build a really big audience.
And then when you get here, do you just literally just
remove the sign and be all right, turn on the sound. Yeah, it worked really well. I mean, we used to be really big in the live stream when we first started, Flight 1 or whatever, race flight back then. So.
You know what's funny is I didn't even think of it, Jake, that apparently, because Jake and I are wearing matching tank tops, but his is blue and mine's pink, which is kind of like our show's colors too.
It's warm out.
Yeah, it's hot as shit. That's why I'm in a tank top.
I think it was supposed to be 107 here today. So
it felt like 91 here today, and it was snowing 2 weeks ago.
That's kind of crazy. It doesn't really feel that bad here though when it's hot.
It feels bad.
As long as you're not in the sun, it's pretty okay.
Where are you guys located?
In Arizona.
Yep, that would make a lot of sense.
I actually want to go to Arizona for those Arizona night tracks one of these days or one of these years or whatever.
Yeah, I think they're doing one up north in next month, I guess.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But yeah, they're pretty cool. They break your equipment, but they look really neat for sure.
So, welcome, Preston. Thank you so much for joining us. In case everybody didn't know in here, this is Preston Garrison of Flight 1. Super excited to have him on. Or did you already do that?
I mentioned it, but I didn't give as good an intro as you.
Well, I'll let Kat kind of start asking questions because I know a little bit about you and whatnot. I've been in the hobby for quite a while, so I've been in your following.
I actually I'm still not at my 1 year. I'm coming up on it, but I'm not even at 1 year in the hobby yet. So I know Flight 1, but I never knew race flight. I've always known it as Flight 1. So
yeah, it's okay. We're trying to figure it out.
Drone so far.
Race flight. But okay, now I can hear you better.
Good.
There we go.
Hold on.
Yeah, the old reliable AirPods, huh?
When did this all start for you, Preston? When did you get into the hobby in general?
I don't know, 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, somewhere around there.
And what happened? Was it you just saw a drone at a store? Did someone buy you one? How'd you get into it?
I don't know. We just wanted to hold on. Sorry. I'm going to change the output here. Give me 1 second. All right. Can you talk now?
Test.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we wanted to do drones basically, and I don't know. We saw them and we thought it'd be cool. So I think when we first got into it, we looked for software to use and hardware to use, and we found out about D Ronin, and we looked into that and talked to them for a while, and we bought a bunch of stuff for them. And honestly, the guys that ran it kind of were a bunch of assholes. And then we found out about Clean Flight around that time, or Beta Flight, and so we ended up. I don't even know if we ever flew D Ronin, but I think we ended up flying with Beta Flight. But it was just so much work to get flying. Like, be smart with this stuff. And I don't know, it took weeks, I think, to get flying at the time. I mean, I know it's easier now, but back then it was super hard. And so when I got into it, I'm like, this is stupid. It doesn't need to be this hard. And that's how we started, race flight at the time, but now Flight One. It's because more or less, not only did we want to fly well, but we wanted to essentially be much easier to set up. Because why do you have to do so much work to fly a drone? It didn't make any sense at the time.
Yeah, see, I would
still doesn't
totally
make sense.
That makes total sense, because like even when I had to help a friend put Flight One on a drone and I'd never even seen the software before or any of the programming, it literally step by step tells you what to do. And at the time, I couldn't even look at Betaflight. Like, I had no idea how to deal with it, but I could pick up your stuff right away.
Yeah,
so that's fantastic.
I think it's a barrier to entry that, they intentionally want there. They want to keep people out of the hobby that don't want to work for it because they had to work for it. It's kind of like if you go to, apply for a company and the guy hiring has a college degree, he wants everyone to have a college degree because he has a college degree.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of that thinking, with a lot of the Betaflight crowd. And to me, that's just stupid. I want to fly drones. I don't want to program computers. I do want to program computers, but I don't want to have to fly drones, I guess.
Right.
That's the way to say. So, that's kind of why we started everything, and that's what came from them. And at the time we talked, I think I talked to Dominic, from Clean Flight. I don't know, if you have been in this a long time, you don't know who Dominic is.
Good old Clean Flight. Ooh.
Yeah, he works for us now, actually, but he started everything. Everyone has him to thank, more or less, for the modern everything. Because he, over half of Betaflight was written by him. But at the time I talked to him and I'm like, hey, why does this have to be so difficult? Like, why can't we make this easier? And I don't know, he was maybe busy, or I don't know, didn't want to deal with it or whatever. So he didn't want to do anything. And Boris just definitely was a pain back then.
No, for sure.
So it was just a bunch of, I don't know, jerks in the hobby, like keeping, they felt they're better than everyone, or whatever it was at the time. And it just.
So did they kind of snub you, and then you were like, all right, I can play this game and dominate you at it too?
Yeah, because they all like, who are you? You don't know what you're doing. And at the time, I had a pretty good big company that did a lot of development and technology and stuff. And I'm like, look, guys, I'm willing to put my resources into it. I'm willing to put employees on it. I'm willing to do all this other stuff. We can make this better. And they're just like, we don't need any of that crap. And I think that's kind of the open source mentality. I think that's why a lot of big companies don't want to get involved in open source, because it's so politics. You have to get so much butt to get anything done. And I think the projects miss out on a lot of stuff because of it. Even Betaflight right now, I know they take donations, but does anyone know where those donations go or who gets them? And do any of the developers get them and things like that? There's just I don't know. I don't know. The whole open source stuff just kind of turned me off every time we tried to get involved in it. And I think it's pretty hard to get people to help too. So you're spending so much time, the guys at Betaflight spend so much time just, trying to make people do things right, or stuff. It seems.
See, I could never figure out how people get paid for all that R&D that they have to go through for all of that. That's insane.
And to me, it's a shame, because what I would like to see is the developers for Betaflight get paid.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chinese companies have to actually pay something to use it. You know what I'm saying? And I don't want to say just Chinese companies, although I think there's one other company that's not Chinese that really sells hardware direct, if you don't include Pyro and Race Day Quads. And but none of these guys, even Pyro, Race Day Quads, none of them have to pay for all that software everyone's using. So they're just, how easy it is to get a flight controller made? You can just go find someone to make you a flight controller. So they're just riding on the backs of all this hard work with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it just doesn't make it's just sad, And there's a big turnover in the open source stuff. A lot of the guys that invented a lot of the stuff in Betaflight even aren't there anymore. The guys that did the F7 stuff isn't there. The guy that did all the RPM filter stuff isn't there. No one wants to stick around, so they're constantly turning over developers, and that's probably part of it. And I don't know. I guess I'm on a tangent now, but that's
no, you're good. So
I think
it's
good information that the average person would not know. As just a normal consumer, we are not privy to this side, right? And it's kind of similar to what Hugo told us last week about how clones really affect your guys' industry and business, and now you're telling us the other side of open source.
Well, and it's sad because if you look at us, people compare the cost of our flight controller versus these companies that literally You know, what is a salary over in China? Like, you know, $1,000 a month is making a fortune in China, for example. And they don't have to pay hardly anyone. They pay some customer service people, and that's it. And they get the software. But we're paying like developers, and we're trying to support the people that built this hobby. I mean, like, we're trying to support Dominic, who was one of the people that like everyone should be thankful for, and obviously us and my son and my family, because we're mostly family owned. And you know, we take care of our pilots too. You know, we want to give them plenty of hardware so they can get the word out there and help people. And our customer service people, like, we don't directly pay them, but we pay them in lots of free hardware. So, you know, all that stuff costs money, and you really don't see any other company doing much of that stuff except maybe TBS. You know, they try and make their own stuff and innovate and sponsor people and stuff. But it's kind of sad, you know. Like, to me, it's like, you know, you should choose where your money goes based on that. You know, you can't really compare our flight controller to someone else's because we like are writing all the software. Like, it costs money to do all the stuff we're doing. So the fact that ours is within a few dollars of every other flight controller in the market, to me, is kind of crazy. It's like a bargain, and you can still run Betaflight, you know, if you want to. So I don't know. That's kind of like the hobby. I don't know. Hopefully it'll change over time. But there seems like there's always a new company willing to step up and make something super cheap and copy someone else or whatever else. And I don't want to say it's like Chinese people, because I have lots of Chinese friends. It just happens to be their culture, I guess, encourages more of that stuff. And it's not like a Chinese thing. It's just I think it's the software that enables it more than anything. It's not really the people that do it. It's why not? I mean, if you can do it, like, why wouldn't you? Really?
Well, I was going to say, you're doing the F411 boards now with...
Yeah, we're licensing them.
That's
so you can use our software.
So it's all software based, really, right?
Yeah. I mean, at least that. But I mean, it's not really. You know, we sell so few licenses compared to the actual flight controllers. Really, I mean, people want to know it works. And I think the problem with the F411 boards is there's really no good ones on the market at all. And I don't know if you have any micro stuff, but they all eventually die. And they're the all-in-one things, and you know, they're not good quality. So I mean, eventually we're going to have our own board come out that's much higher quality. But I think the biggest problem with that is that discourages people, because they buy this drone and they think it's amazing. They fly it for a while, and then all of a sudden it catches on fire. And it makes sense. I mean, it's like they're going as cheap as possible, right? Like they're trying to make these things so dirt cheap, because that's what people expect. And then, you know, people pay dirt cheap for these boards. And then they catch on fire, and they kind of get what they pay for. But there's not really, I guess, a premium option out there right now for those boards.
Well, and it's funny because I've seen in the last couple of days at least 12 people complaining that their Taycan, I think it was the new Diatone Tina Whoop or whatever, is catching fire in flight and just falling out of the sky on them mid-flight.
Like I mean, we kind of got some blame on that, which doesn't make any sense. Like, software doesn't like drones on fire. It's not how it works. But yeah, it's happened with Betaflight too. But it's like, you know, we were a good company to blame. It's like, oh, we can blame Flight One, and they're like trying to rectify it. I mean, they're trying to make it better. They're trying to make a more premium, higher amp board. But it's just stupid, because they're just, some guy sells a board for $40, so they need to figure out a way to sell a board for $40, and so you just get all this cheap garbage on the market. And as a new user coming in, how do you know the difference? And I mean, there's a lot of user error on top of everything. So when you build a quad, you're going to probably make mistakes, right? You know, people make mistakes, and so if you don't build it quite right, or things touch, or things eventually hit, or whatever, you know, that's catching on fire. At least that's your fault. But when you buy like a ready to fly, you kind of expect it to last longer.
To be ready to fly, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's more frustrating. Like, we definitely have. I mean, the way we know, hey, you know, it's people's build errors more than anything as well, because usually we'll catch them. You know, they'll send us stuff and be like, oh, you know, there's a short here or whatever. But the guys that have done it a really long time, like our team members and stuff, like, they don't go through hardware very fast at all. You know, so I think as you learn to build and you learn the little tricks, the hardware lasts a lot longer. But I think on the micro stuff, there's just not stuff out there that's powerful enough to take a beating like the bigger stuff can. And, you know, hopefully we'll fix that after this new release. We'll have another release. But first we got at least the full size stuff, and then we'll release some of the micro stuff.
Well, one of our viewers, Jack Fu, he wanted to know what your thoughts are about Emu Flight on Flight 1, because he thinks it's his favorite setup.
I think Emu Flight just, I don't know, they're doing some things that I think they're just right now trying a lot of different things, and they're basing it on 3.5 beta flight, which was super overfiltered. And so I think people just are more likely to like it if you have problem setups. And I think for the micro stuff, they're doing some things a little different that people like. Although, I mean, I don't know. I think people like Flight 1 better, Falco X better on that stuff. But I don't know. I think it's just a new thing on the block. It's a new cool thing. People like to try it. But hey, if you're buying our hardware, I don't care what software you run, to be honest.
So do you experiment with other boards and the different GUIs and stuff like that, or do you just stay?
I don't tend to look at other people's code or other people's software because they don't necessarily understand what they're doing, kind of is the way I look at it when I look at that stuff. So it's not anything to me worth copying. Nick kind of looks at some stuff sometimes and he's like, well, they're trying this. And then maybe I'll argue with him and be like, well, that really won't do any, it should be done like this. But I don't know. And the GUIs, like, I don't know. It's just not really, to me, I have an idea in my head of where I want to go. And that idea is pretty clear. So I don't really need to look at other stuff. I don't want to
You don't even want a computer to be in the room when you set up a drone.
Yeah. I mean, let's think about this. So the majority of people don't own a computer, right? Like the majority of people in the world don't own a computer.
This is all everybody needs.
Yeah, but the majority of people own a phone, right?
Yeah.
You can get a phone for like $20, an Android phone. So why are we doing all our work on the computer when the majority of people don't have it? And that goes along with the whole barrier to entry. Like we're making it more difficult for people to fly drones. We're saying, hey, you have to have a computer. And not only that, but you have to have a computer in the field with you. So not only
I was just going to say that, yeah.
Yeah, you have to have a laptop. Like to me, that's just
whereas you're already going to have your phone with you because we all bring our phone wherever we go.
And truthfully, you don't even need your phone. I mean, you could buy one of our boards that comes pre-flashed. You don't ever need to upgrade. You can do everything you ever need to do with what's on it. Like updating is just, an extra thing. It's like when you buy a GoPro, most people don't upgrade their GoPros. It's working well. They just leave it alone. It's very few people are probably sitting out there like, oh, there's a new update on my GoPro. I'm going to upgrade.
I hate it.
Yeah. And the DJI drones, they self-update, which drives me nuts. It's like you go out to fly and, you got to wait, for 20 minutes while you update your drone. And by then the sun's down or whatever. So you don't even need to update, and that's kind of the goal. Like, hey, if you don't even own a phone, you can go fly. And we're doing a new configurator with more stuff on it for the computer because we still have holdouts that honestly I think haven't tried it, and that's the reason they think they want the computer stuff. Because anyone that's tried it, they might be stubborn people and they're like, oh, this sucks, I don't want this. And some of the team members are the same way, but eventually they realize that it's just better with very limited things that aren't better. I mean, setting up an OSD is kind of a pain in the butt. There's a few minor things like backing up and restoring configurations and stuff is a little pain in the butt. But that's stuff we can do on the phone now. We actually have an Android client already, and we'll have an iPhone one soon.
Oh,
so
really cool.
Yeah. So I don't know. To me, there's just not a reason to use a computer, I guess. So that's why
for sure
it's not that way.
So Ian Paluska's asking what happened with Vanover and Minchin.
Well, I think this kind of stuff's kind of silly because first of all, we can't sponsor the entire world,
right?
And like we lose one pilot and everyone's like, oh, I can't believe you lost them. And to be honest, these guys are getting thrown a lot of money. And I don't want to speak too much about that, but people are offering them a lot of money to do things. And so when they come to me and say, hey, pay me to fly Flight 1 or I'll go elsewhere, it's like goodbye. Like it's as simple as that. I how many flight controllers we have to sell to pay a pilot, hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars a month. It's just not worth it. No pilot sells that amount of flight controllers. And and people like Min Chan, I mean, in his country is maybe a big deal. He's in the Olympics, and usually what happens, like this goes back. I mean, Sean Taylor's a really good friend of mine, and he was the first one to experience this. So Sean, at the time, he was, when he was at his heyday, all these companies offered him tons of money, right? They're like, I'm going to pay you, $1,000 a month or whatever. I don't know what the number is, but to fly my flight control, I'm going to pay, so he has all these companies. And when at the time, he's like, oh, they're going to sign a 8-year contract. And I'm like, they're going to stop paying before the year's even up because they want to get the hype at the beginning and then they're going to stop paying. And that's more or less like what happened to him. And no, I know that. Like, I know these deals aren't long-term in general because it's not profitable, right? If you're paying someone, let's say $1,000 a month, and let's say we make $20 a flight controller, which, with expenses for employees and everyone else is probably not even that. They're not even close to that. But even at $20 flight controller, we have to sell, like, what is that? 50 flight controllers per month. That pilot has to sell that amount minimum.
Yeah.
Even break even. And these companies kind of find that out, but they want to jump on the next hype. I mean, it's all about hype, right?
Well, you don't want people to have to keep buying new ones because that usually means there's something wrong with the product too. So you'd rather them be able to buy it and just stick with it, right?
And it's disappointing because I thought of Vanover as a friend. Like, he's been over my house like so many times and all this other stuff. And I think he kind of butted heads with Evan at the time too, because we had just brought Evan on the team, and my money was on Evan at that time. I knew Evan was going to win, and he did. And so, like, I don't know, maybe I spent more time with Evan than him, and he got butthurt. Who knows? I can't tell you. But losing 1 or 2 pilots, like, we have so many pilots. I mean, right now in multi-GP with the new season, like, I think the top 5 pilots are flying Flight 1. And last year, most of the top 10 was Flight 1. And we sponsor so many pilots and so many great pilots. If people want to be there, they can be there. If not, they can go. And I think the longer you're in this hobby, the bigger ego gets and the more you think you're valuable. And if you notice, it's the really old ones that end up, jumping ship. And you can see them. They go to sponsor to sponsor, sponsor to sponsor. They jump all around. So, I mean, it's kind of, to me, like, don't ever buy anything just because a sponsored pilot's flying it. But remember, if a sponsored pilot, if they're not getting paid and a sponsored pilot's buying it, it's probably, like someone like Evan, he could fly any flight controller. Like, anyone would give him free flight controllers, right? So he's flying it because it's good, in my opinion. But if they're getting paid and you have no way to know if they're getting paid, it's a whole different thing.
And you want someone that believes in your products, not just believes in their paycheck.
Yeah, exactly. To me, it's just never been worth. I mean, doing partnership deals where we make a product with them or something like that, that's different. If you sell 1,000 flight controllers and you got $2 a flight controller and you made $2,000, like, that's like, oh yeah, that's a no-brainer. That's easy. But just outright paying him, because what is the person going to do? The minute you pay them, they're going to just like, oh great, now I can sit on my couch and do nothing. Like, it's very few people, like, if there's no incentivized thing to keep pushing, it makes it hard for them to do that. And I think there's a lot less money in our hobby now. So that was a long way to go around. But I mean, there's just so many sponsors, there's so many competitions. Yeah, it's expensive. Like, we lose money every month. Like, I mean, if we add up how much I put in the company and how much we made, we're not break even at this point, I don't think. So, it's a whole. And I wish people would, I don't know, talk with their money. Support innovation, support companies that are like us, and TPS does stuff, and people that are actually doing new stuff, making new software. Immersion, he's the first one to come out with the goggle module. Everyone bought that. I'm glad, because it was more innovative. But companies like that are making stuff, like, look at the companies who's making something new and cool, and support them. Don't support the guys that are just copying someone else and then making it $2 cheaper or whatever.
Right. No, I get that for sure.
Yeah. Johnny 5 wants to know, what's the deal with the Diatone Cube? They stopped doing the Falco version. His flamed up, and Diatone's like, yeah, it happens.
Yeah, I mean, we have a replacement plan on that stuff, so if it does have that happen, to be honest, I think it's just like I said. Like, I think all the hardware they're trying to make cheap, it's rated like as low. Like, if you're going to pull 10 amps, it's rated for 10 amps, right? So, when you have a thing filled with FETs and you have these cheap thin motors, it's very, like, you hit a grass the wrong way, it's going to bend that motor. That motor's tiny, it's thin, it's light. It's very easy to mess up. And if a motor gets messed up and then your ESC is barely rated, the motor basically causes a short, it catches fire. Or if the motor gets bound, it catches fire. Like I said, Diatone does have a new board coming out. It's higher rated. Hopefully it'll help solve a lot of these issues. But I think it's just, those micros are just that way. I mean, I talk to Bob Ruge all the time, and he basically tells me the same thing. He's like, there's just no good hardware out there. They're just not rated high enough. And I think that's just the way that is right now. I think it'll change. It's just like, the big stuff. It used to be that way too. Like everyone got the cheapest thing, and they're having lots of fire and stuff. And then people start wanting to pay more for better quality motors or better quality flight controllers.
Yeah, they get tired of the fire.
Yeah, so I think that's a relatively new market. I think everything's super cheap in it right now, and I think as people learn, it'll hopefully get better. They can, put their money where their mouth is. And we have programs coming too where we can, I don't know, we're going to start warrantying stuff better and even guaranteeing our stuff basically if you're using the right stuff. Because the problem is you're connecting so many different components on these quads. So if one component is bad or crappy, it'll take out the other ones, right? Like you can have a bad VTX and it can take out everything. It can take out your ESC and your flight controller. Because if it causes a short, it can short out the whole system. So
yeah.
But in that particular case, I think I think they're all kind of that way. Mine, I've had zero issues with. We've been flying ours forever. But every time I pick it up, I spin all the motors, make sure they spin freely. I make sure everything's good. I put it on the ground, then I arm it. I think if you're just throwing it on the ground, arming it, a motor could be bad, a bearing could be bad, it's just going to catch fire. So if you're real careful, don't coupe a mode, don't turtle mode or whatever, unless you absolutely have to. And you're real careful with them, they last forever. At least ours have. But I do think that, maybe it takes the wrong hit or something happens or the motor overheats. I don't know. The prop gets stuck. There's a million things can happen. And they're not super expensive things. I mean, you're spending $150 total on it. So it's just not going to be as beefy as your 5-inch quad that you spent $300 on or whatever. So
yeah, for sure.
Rob Webb was saying, it's kind of going back a bit to when you were talking about the mobile, that many mobile sites aren't cross-compatible when it comes to some access networks, and an online fill form can be difficult without having a computer to enter, compile a system. It's not feasible on mobile. And then he said it would be more headaches to code on a mobile device. So I don't know if you have any comment for him on that one.
Well, it seems like he's talking about programming, and I don't expect you to program on a mobile device, but that's my whole point. We don't want our people to have to program their drone. They're just trying to fly and change settings. So, I don't know if that answers the question, but I'm not sure. I'm not saying we should never have a computer. Obviously, I got lots of computers. But I just don't think that the average person should have to have a computer to fly a drone.
I think we should get to Kyle's question, Jake. He asked it as soon as he walked in. He's asked it 4 times. It's coming up. So, Jake, take it away because this one was your baby.
When is this bad boy coming out?
So we're going to open up pre-orders any day now. It's already in the process of being manufactured. So it's not delaying. The orders aren't delaying it getting made. But we just want to make sure we have all the advertising stuff and all the features and all that stuff listed and make sure it's on the site. And then we'll open pre-orders. So maybe tomorrow, maybe sometime this week is the kind of the plan. But
Kyle is highly anticipating this thing like no other. Yeah,
it should be around 3 weeks that we're going to actually have them. And yeah, it's super hyped. Everyone's super excited with it. We work with all the, some of the biggest pilots on it. It's the most powerful thing out there. It's 500 megahertz. And even if you compare megahertz, so if you take the fastest F7, I think it's 216 or something, and ours is 500. So it's double that, but it's faster for a lot of other reasons. It has faster hardware stuff, faster hardware acceleration, faster all kinds of crazy stuff. We can do AI, has AI acceleration. So not only is it megahertz faster, but if you guys own a computer, you can buy an AMD, it's 2 gigahertz, and then buy an Intel that's 3 gigahertz, but the AMD can actually be faster, even though the megahertz are the same. Mm-hmm. And so this is similar. So there's just nothing on the market like this. Dominic has a board with a slower version of the H7 that he sells. But this is by far the fastest. And we're making it work in Beta Flight and Flight 1. So it's a no-brainer. And it's a few bucks more than our board now. So
are the colors significant at all, or is it just because that's what each pilot chose?
They pick the colors, but basically each one's going to come customized with the pilot stuff. And also, what you're going to do some sort of get access to the pilot, like you get their PIDs and rates and access to their stuff as they change things, and we're gonna tie in the pilot.
So if you buy a Willy board, you get Willy's rates and
and then we're gonna try and put a splash screen in there and that stuff, and you can change it too. Because remember, we have a vector OSD now, so we can do full graphics. So like imagine we can pretty much do anything a video game can do now on this board, with the exception it's only 3 colors. It's like gray, black, and white. But like we can do all kinds of graphics and things. So when it comes out, it's going to be not all that crazy exciting stuff. But as time goes on, we're just going to take advantage of all that stuff and have really cool like menus that fly around and all kinds of stuff.
So, and I have to ask, because the colors are kind of pilot specific and everything,
right?
And I may be just like super out of the loop, but when I first looked at this one, I thought that was Schizo's board. It is not Schizo's board.
No, because Schizo was black before. John is a really good.
Assumed.
Yeah, well, John's a really good friend of mine, but he's kind of like not really flying much right now, and he's doing video games right now, and he's working on the car and stuff, and so we might the next flight controller comes, we probably will do a Schizo version, and we're not getting rid of the current Schizo one.
I was gonna say I haven't seen him in a while either, so I'm like,
maybe he'll get his ass motivated and
get
friends again. Yeah, people need to start harassing him. But it's like that we picked the pilot. Like these guys are super active right now, and so that's the pilots we picked. Picked 2 racers and 2 freestylers, and now obviously Nick works really closely with us. Like he codes with us and does all kinds of things with us. So obviously we're going to do one for him, and then Evan is real close with us. He's been with us forever, and Chief and
Wild Willy, of course.
Johnny's been with us since when we first started. Johnny's always flown us. So.
I'm kind of a fanboy, so I'd probably be working this guy's if I had one.
Who, Johnny's, you're saying?
Yeah.
He's cool. He's been a friend of mine for a while too. But yeah, I mean everyone, and I like to give back to people that have given back too. So that's kind of how we pick the pilots to do stuff with, and so that's.
Are you gonna put a poll on who's more popular out of your sales there?
We can't tell Matt. That'll make them all.
He doesn't want anyone's feelings hurt. Then they might take other companies on him. Come on now.
Oh goodness.
Yeah. We'll see. Hopefully they'll all hype him.
Scarecrow wants to know when you're going to send him some to take photographs of. I don't know if you know who he is.
Yeah, I know. He's doing stuff with us. Yeah. JR. Yes.
Yeah, JR.
Yeah. But yeah, well, hopefully when they come out, we don't have any of the ones that look like that. We have prototypes, which you guys have seen pictures of. But the prototypes we have are the 20 by 21. So the electronics are the same. It just doesn't have that 30 by 30 break off thing on it.
That's cool. I do have to say, that's freaking cool. I do like that.
I think it's a pretty good idea. I mean, we did it with our ESC. So now we have an ESC that does it and a flight controller that does it. So literally you can just buy both and do 20 by 20 or 30 by 30, which I think is really cool. And really the advantage of the 30 by 30 stuff is it's more durable, but in the terms of this flight controller, the flight controller should be equally durable. So we will do a 30 by 30 flight controller next, and we're testing one, but we're going to put some super secret stuff on it that makes it work. Like we take advantage of the more room. Like with this type of flight control, we didn't need more room. So this was a really good way to have 20 by 20 and 30 by 30 with one product. So people just know what they can buy and they can use it for either one, which is nice. But I mean, if it was up to me, we would have everything would be bigger because we can make stuff more durable if it's bigger.
True.
But
Fireball FPV wants to know how the new flight controller is going to work with DJI OSD.
So it'll be plug and play at DJI, and we'll support whatever DJI supports. So right now, the menuing system, they just keep telling us they're going to support it. We've talked to DJI. We actually met with DJI. We spent all day with them in China. They're supposed to be working on this stuff, but I think they just, I don't know, they choose what they work on, basically. We work with Caddx closely, too. So Caddx is going to try and get them to support as well, but it's just DJI does what DJI wants to do.
Right.
So at this point, it's just waiting for them. I don't know why they did it the way they did it. It's retarded. Like they could just put away. You can draw anything you want on the screen, right? And then every feature in Betaflight, every feature in Flight 1 would work. The way they're doing things, where they have to write all this extra code and to add anything to it makes zero sense. Like that. yeah, it's just stupid. They're just
It's
doing
working hard, not smart.
Yeah, for nothing. Like they literally could put a thing in there. It's like display text at these coordinates. That's all they have to do. And everything would be supported overnight, and they would never have to do any more code again. And I cannot make them understand this. I guess I don't speak good enough Chinese because I cannot make them understand this. And everyone I know that speaks Chinese, talking to them, can't make them understand this. So I don't know. It is what it is. But I mean, Betaflight like exists a way to do that right now, and we do too. So if they just added one command instead of what do they have, like 30 commands in there right now to do 30 different things, everything overnight. So it's a shame. I wish there would be a competitor, so they would have to do stuff better.
It'll happen eventually.
Yeah, eventually. Man, they have a lot of money. I don't know if you know. I mean, I don't know if you know how it works in China, but the government literally will give you loans that you never have to pay back. And they'll literally, if you sell something at cost, pay you money to sell it to cost to the United States. So it's tough. Like they have a lot of funding. They're a big company. They have a lot of money. I don't know how anyone can catch up to them. There's really no one that's interested enough in drones. There's no one that's big and makes enough money in drones to make it worth it. So
right.
I think it's going to be a long time.
So what? Okay, before you answer that question, I do have to ask: where are your boards made? Are they made here, or are they?
So the new flight controller. So traditionally, we've been dealing with middlemen in China, like everyone does, right? They have someone who's responsible for talking to an SMT factory, a PCB factory, doing packaging and all that stuff. Like there's all these different companies involved, and as of this new board, we hired Dominic to design our boards direct. And we're controlling everything. So what's cool about this new board is we have a contract signed, or well, not necessarily signed, but we have a deal in place in the U.S. to be a manufacturer here, and we are going to manufacture in China as well. So what's cool about this board is we can manufacture in multiple places, and depending on where we're shipping the boards, we will manufacture in equivalent places. Does that make sense? So the goal is if anything we sell in the U.S., we manufacture in the U.S. because there's no import tariffs, there's no anything. But if we sell a board in China, let's manufacture in China because the same thing applies there, no import tariffs and everything else. And so it's kind of a cool way that people can buy the board and kind of support where they're from too. So, if we have enough business in Europe, we'll manufacture in Europe too. And so you can when you buy one of our controllers, it's made, in the country or whatever in your geographic region that you live in, and that's the first time anyone's done that. I don't think anyone has manufactured anything in the U.S. So
unlike right now, when you're waiting for shipments from across seas, which may not even get there, you can just boot them up here and have them all pressed and whatever you need to do.
Yeah, exactly. And we control. So our biggest problem right now has been getting hardware at a regular pace.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're out of control. We're literally relying on the person in the middle to coordinate everything and do everything and buy everything, and if he doesn't want to spend the money to have a bunch of extras, we don't really have control. We don't really get to make a decision. Like buying like the PCB, the actual board with nothing on it, is one of the cheapest things on the flight controller. And so, but it's one of the things that takes the longest amount of time. So I want them to have a ton of PCBs on hand because it's like a week after that, right? But it never works out that way. And it's because I don't control the buying. I basically pay them per unit and they control everything. And so they're, very thrifty because, in China, especially, margins are very small. They make 10% margins, So they don't have the money to buffer stuff, and they don't have the credit like we have in the U.S. too. Like if I want to buy a ton of electronic components in the U.S., I can buy them now and pay in 90 days, right? That's pretty standard for stuff. So by us being able to control this stuff now, we can control the buying, and hopefully we won't have any more of the crazy delays we've had in the past that we have zero control over.
No, absolutely.
And not only that, but we don't do the designs of some other stuff. Like we do this, like I sketch out everything. I'm like, this pin goes to this, and this goes to this, and this needs to change to this. I sketch out. We do all that part. but the final, like the very final design, we don't do, and they'll design for price. So they'll take a shortcut to make it cheaper that I don't even realize they took, or they'll do things that's not the way I would do them. And what's nice about now that we're controlling this stuff is we can control that. Like our ESCs had problems about stuff that I would have never done that way. And it has to do with them being so small, for one, because we're trying to put everything in this tiny little spot. And everyone's ESCs have problems for that reason. But it's just like, it's when you control it, you can control the quality, you control the designs, you can control the manufacturing. There's so many advantages to it. So this new one is the very first time that we've ever been fully in control. There is no middle involved in anything we do. So yeah, hopefully it'll be really well. And then what's cool is we can get a bunch of PCBs made maybe at one factory, and then take all those PCBs and ship them to the SMT factories, everywhere. So in the U.S. or in China or whatever else. So it's pretty cool how we're doing this. And yeah, I mean, hopefully everyone says, we want to buy American, we want to buy American. Well, this is going to be, the time to show that it's worthwhile for companies to make stuff in the country you're in. Like if you're in Europe, if there's a European version, I think you should buy it. If it helps support the economy, and that's what we're doing. And the other thing we're going to start doing is distributing out of all those regions. So we're going to have distributors in Europe. We're going to have warehousing basically in Europe. We're going to have warehousing in Australia, warehousing in China, and warehousing in the US. So we'll be able to get boards to people quickly and cheaply. And we won't be so dependent on the vendors, and the vendors won't be so dependent on us having to ship stuff from the US if they want to carry stuff.
That's very cool.
And because I think that's important too. I think that's one thing we're losing in the US is like, there's very few vendors now. There's no local hobby shops that get people in it and stuff. And I think our hobby's kind of suffering because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no one wants to wait, especially when you order something. You're like, well, okay, it's a month later. Where is it? They want it now.
China's been really bad. Like we have a package that was shipped like a month ago in China that still hasn't gotten out. Like with DHL. Like now, that's why I said we switched to FedEx and stuff because they're faster. But yeah, it's gone crazy. The virus has really locked down the whole world. And that's one advantage of us hopefully being a manufacturer local too, is like that won't affect us.
It will no longer be an issue
in California. So right now it's in the process in China. And then from there, we're making the PCBs at one place, and we're making a lot of PCBs. And then from there, we're going to, do them in US, we're going to do them in China. They're the first two places. And then we'll send those to our warehouses in Europe and Australia and China and US. And then, so hopefully it should go really well.
Evil FPB wants to know if you plan to make your own VTX or if you're only going to focus on flight controllers and ESCs. We were working on our own VTX before, and we could do one. It's not very hard to do, but now we've been working with TBS on some things, and what's really cool is we plan to offer like a plug and play package that comes, like sell VTXs with the wire already on them that you just plug in, and sell like crossfire receivers. So being able to, get OEM stuff from TBS kind of makes it not necessarily worth it to do that stuff. If we can just take them, put them in our factory, put our wires on them, do whatever, get them all ready, get them all Flight 1-like, and then they'll just be plug and play. So with the new flight controller, that's one of the reasons it's taking time. We're going to actually offer plug and play options where you can get the crossfire receiver, the VTX, the flight controller, the ESC, all ready to go, no soldering. Just plug.
See, that was one of my biggest issues when I tried Falco X the first time, is getting my receiver to work. Because I was on a regular Flight 1 board, put Falco X on it, and my receiver just would not recognize. And you actually helped me troubleshoot, and you were like, flip the wires.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, and what's cool about this new H7 too is, so the pins are like reassignable. So like, the pins, when you see the processor, you got this processor, you got all these pins on the outside. So all those pins, we can actually change the function of them. So cool. So basically now you can plug it in and we can change the function depending on the receiver. So now we can test for one receiver, change the way it works, and test for another receiver. It needs to do something different. So it's going to be, this new one's even more plug and play. There's no jumpers you have to solder. It all does it automatically now. And that's one cool thing about this chip, is it lets you do that kind of
Everybody wants that H7.
Yeah, every single person.
Yeah, I can't imagine buying anything else as a consumer. So hopefully it'll work out. Like why would I mean you want to save the price of a McDonald's meal, then that would be the only reason to buy something else, because it's not going to be that expensive, and it's it's obviously a little more expensive, but I don't know, it's no brainer. I mean, if you want to use Betaflight, you can use Betaflight. You want to use Flight 1, you can use Flight 1. EMU Flight will not work because they're based on Betaflight 3.5, so I think they'd have to do a lot of work to get to it. But yeah, to me, it's kind of a no-brainer. I don't know. I think those guys should maybe backport their stuff into the newest Betaflight, because I do think it's pretty solid. But I guess we'll see. But hopefully, everyone will speak with their wallet.
There's so many comments that are worth looking at. So Jack Fu says, will the consumer have the choice to buy from another country? I think he means if in another country. Like, can you buy from anywhere? Or are you going to be stuck with local?
I mean, I guess you could if you wanted to pay more shipping, but I don't know why you'd want to. Like, I don't know. I guess he should comment like the scenario where he feels he'd want to do it. But yeah, the way we're going to do it is it's basically going to show what's in the warehouse. Kind of like Hobby King used to do. So it'll be like this this one's in stock in Europe or whatever. So where it comes from. I mean, that's the goal. I mean, that might not be ready the minute we open our orders, but the goal is, and what's cool too is we're going to start searching all the vendors. So if it doesn't show in stock in us, it'll tell you what vendor has it in stock.
Dope.
So we're going to make it much easier to kind of find our gear is the goal, because I know that's been the biggest thing, and hopefully that'll help out the vendors too. Because I think there's a lot of good vendors out there that no one knows about, maybe, and there's they might be able to find our stuff if they just knew about them. And I think the vendors aren't as the smaller guys aren't necessarily as good at getting the word out there about their existence. So maybe that'll help them out. Anyone that's willing to carry all our products, we'll put on that search engine.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Mike's Camping and FPV wants to know what you're like. I guess the easiest way you can explain the difference between the H7 and he says the other 7.
Okay,
F7,
so
probably.
the F7 is like the little baby. It's like 1/10 the speed for some things. So way slower, way less features, way less hardware acceleration. It's basically like comparing, a 5-year-old Android phone to the latest iPhone or something. It's significantly worse in every way. The core, the CPU. So an MCU is basically like a CPU with memory and hardware interfaces and stuff. So the cores are similar. They're like basically an ARM7 core, but that's all the similarities from there. It's just a big badass processor MCU compared to the little F7. I mean, we've never gone to F7 because there's no advantage. The F4 is barely slower than the F7. It makes no sense. So that's the reason we've never done an F7 board. The only advantage is it does inversion, so you wouldn't have to solder a jumper. Essentially, would be the only advantage to going to an F7. So it never made sense for us to go to F7, but this H7 it makes sense. And the biggest thing is like that vector OSD. Like it takes a decent amount of processing power to do cool stuff on it. Because our stuff is all OSD based. We control the camera now. We control the OSD. We're not using a separate chip for it anymore. It's all done by our software, our CPU. So we need the power for that too. Otherwise, we'd have to run two processors just to do an OSD. So it should be able to do a lot of cool stuff. And what's kind of cool about it is if you use DJI, for example, and you're not using the OSD, you're going to actually gain some CPU power. Because it's not going to need to do the OSD stuff. So I think that's kind of cool about it too. So it's the best platform by far right now.
So just curious, like I fly a bunch of F4s that are Betaflight, and they all fly, in my opinion, they fly amazingly. They're all set up for me and everything, right? What would make me need to go to this F7 or even, your Flight 1 F7 or M7 or...
Well, I think it's... I mean, I don't know.
So many letters.
Flies better. I mean, the difference between Falco X and Betaflight, the feel is a lot different. I think that's hard to explain. And there's a lot of things I see in people's footage that they don't realize are there. We do better. But it lets us do a lot smarter things too, like, AI-based filtering and AI-based tuning and all kinds of things that we couldn't do before. We don't have the processing power for. Like we have a thing called Whisper mode that's the new, like everyone's recently been trying, and it's just a whole different way to do the calculations for the PID controller basically. And it flies better, but the way we do that now is kind of a hack. We can do it for all computational with the H7. You know, there's a lot of different things we could probably do, and it just, the sky's the limit. I mean, do you want something that's going to be outdated, you know, or do you want to have the fastest thing possible? So when new features come out, and there will be a lot of features that aren't, like, as soon as this board comes out, pretty much any new features that there's going to be so much stuff we can't do on the old stuff, it's only going to be on it. So if you want to get any of that stuff, the new stuff that requires processing power, it's only going to be on it. So
it's future proofing essentially.
Yeah. It's essentially getting, you know, a new computer instead of like, in the case of a F4, that's like a 10-year-old computer. So just curious now, flight controller, just badass, right?
Now, I was, and this comes back to a little bit of troubleshooting I was going through with you at one point. For instance, I got set up on a Flight One setup of my own, and for some reason, I can never get one to work myself, right? And everybody says, this kind of goes back to being able to do the Falco X and everything as well, but I could never get my flight controller, and ESC to sync up perfectly. I still would have to go through and flash to beta flight to be able to run my BL Heli 32 and all that stuff. And this was using, you know, a Bolt 32 and the Flight One flight controller. You know what I mean? So is that going to be an issue in going on in the future?
So our old configurator had a way to solve this, and we're going to do a similar thing for this. Basically, you push a button and it changes the software on the flight controller so you can do pass-through. The problem with BL Heli is it's terrible. The standard they use for pass-through isn't really pass-through. It would be a ton of coding for us on a platform that, to be honest, is going away. We're going to get off BL Heli eventually and have our own ESC firmware. So it's a terrible standard. It's a lot of work to support it. So we will have a much easier way to support it in the next configurator release or one coming up soon. So it will be transparent. You won't have to flash beta flight. But it's just the way it's done is terrible. And actually, I've been talking to Felix about, you know, the KISS stuff. Well, it's not KISS anymore. It's, what is it, FET Tech or something. We're putting support for his stuff in there directly in the software because it's easy. It's true pass-through. It's literally open a port, and pass through all the data.
Yeah.
BL Heli is this crazy stuff where you have to support all these commands and do all this crazy stuff. It's just I don't understand why. I don't understand why these guys make stuff so difficult. I guess this is the bottom line. And remember, I got to pay everyone who works on our code. So, you know, if it takes some programmer 2 weeks or a month to do something, how expensive is it to make that feature? Like, is it worth it? You know, we kind of got to say, hey, is this something we need? Is this something we're going to rely on? You know, most people shouldn't even touch their ESC settings. The average user should just buy our ESC, buy our flight controller, plug them in. That's it. Be done. Don't change anything.
And see, that's where I was kind of getting frustrated with my own setup. Like, I've built other people's setups. My son is running a setup. Sorry. My son is running a setup that's Flight One right now, and it works. It flies beautifully, right? And it flies great for him. And I've even flown it myself, and it flies amazing. But whenever I build one for myself using Flight One flight controller and the Flight One ESCs, it says "F you, Jake."
What? I don't know. We have to talk and see what problems you're having.
It's probably that user error thing he was talking about.
It's probably user error. It's got to be user error somewhere along the line.
It should be. I don't know. It should, at least with our latest stuff. Like, I will tell you that if you are the first one on the block to get an ESC from us, for example, like our ESC just came out and you got it. What tends to happen, I know this happened at first with our ESCs, is so, you know, we're relying on BL Heli, right? They have to make their software. So when it first came out, they came set to 24 kilohertz. And so we manufacture all the ESCs and the settings wrong on all of them because we're running at 32 kilohertz. It's outputting at 24 kilohertz. So that causes aliasing. And what aliasing basically is you're sending data here, but you're sending it out to the motors at a different speed, at a slower speed and an unproportional speed, right? Like if it was 8 kilohertz and 32, at least it's proportional. So it causes issues. right? And so everyone needed to change the settings. But that's the first batch. So like usually if you get the second batch, you never have to do any software tweaking or anything. And to be honest, it's not that big a deal to flash Betaflight and change the settings, So I'm not saying don't buy a first batch, but that's just something, hey, in the back of your head, hey, and if you, and we're usually really fast to tell everyone about it. So like as soon as we found that out, we're like, hey, you guys are gonna get these, and I think we even put a sticker on there, and like, hey, make sure you change the settings before you use it. But Betaflight doesn't have these issues because it's like we're kind of like a Ferrari, right? And we want to run.
Here we go, Ford versus Ferrari now.
Yeah, well, we want to run we want everything to be a certain way. Like when Ferrari leaves the factory, they will literally try 10 doors to make sure it has the perfect gap. Like they're going to put this door. But Ford, for example, just takes a door and throws it on, right? So that's kind of like we want the best performance possible. So it's going to be a little more work on your end for the building part. Is kind of the way. Like we have a certain way we want you to build because we don't want to over filter it. We want to make this. We want to do 32 kilohertz. We want to make the filtering good because we want you to have that Ferrari experience when you go to fly your drone. We want it to feel like amazing, and so we kind of want to educate you to do these small little things. Like they're not really that big a deal, and install it just the way it's meant. Like the gummies, the little things on the flight controller, the rubber things we call gummies. Yeah. I invented those. Like everyone copied my design. I invented that. And I did that to get the best performance out of that flight controller. And they're designed to mount a certain way, right? So it's my invention made a certain way, done on a certain flight controller to mount a certain way. So if you think you know better and mount it some different way, it's not going to work as well because that's not how it's designed. And Betaflight is smart in some regards because they will just overfilter, right? And they'll run slower. So you get 90% on more poor built quads. With us, if you build well, you're going to get that 100%. You're never going to get that 10% gap with Betaflight, And so that's the biggest thing I think people run into. But it's really simple. Like I have videos. It's like there's a video proper flight controller mounting. I mean, it's basically you put an M3 screw in, you slide your ESC on it, you slide your flight controller on it, maybe put an O-ring between the two. That's it. That's all you have to do, and it'll fly great. But if you go put a nut on it, that'll mess it up. You go try and use standoffs, that's going to mess it up. Like all these things people don't realize mess it up. And the reason they mess it up is like, think about it. If you put a nut on there, you have this dampening thing that's made to dampen. It's made to be exactly the right size to get the right amount of dampening to minimize the vibration. Well, when you clamp it down, when you squish it down, it no longer acts as a dampener. It's now like a hard piece of rubber. It's not that soft, special material our gummies are made of. If you feel our gummies compared to other people, our material's better. Our sizing's better too. You notice ours will fit like just perfect and not move at all. Other people's gummies I've tried, they fall off, they fly off.
Yeah, you're like, I had that today with my Beta 85 trying to fix it, or whatever the 4K stupid one is that I've never had a good moment with. And yeah, every time you're trying to put the stupid thing back in, oh, that gummy's gone. Oh, now that one's gone. And then you get all four on, you try and put it, now they're crooked, and it's a nightmare.
That little thing people underestimate. Like that's why our government, our country is way better, because something like a gummy, that's the patent, right? That little thing might seem insignificant, but it's like part of the whole magic, right? And that's what we would patent in our country. In China, the reason you have so much cloning is because the only thing you can patent there is the entire drone, right? It has to be exactly the same drone to violate a patent there. You can't patent little things there. And so that's something, keep in mind. That's the little things we try and think of to make the best experience possible. And they're designed to operate in a certain way and be installed in a certain way. And if you do that, if you build your drone like I build our drone, and you're using like our premium motors, like our motors are premium, and there's other ones too, and a premium ESC, the same thing. And you're putting your cap on the ESC, like we say, every single tune in flight in Falco X will work on your drone. Every single one. The reason tunes don't work is because of the build or the equipment. So every drone I ever build, every single tune works perfectly. Like some will work obviously less prop wash or have like a more better feel or whatever else, but every single one will work. And to me, I think it's better to spend a little extra time on your build to have like the best flying quad possible. than try and kind of hide the stuff with filtering and everything else.
I must be doing something wrong. I must be.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you can send me your stuff and we can figure it out. I'm sure. I don't think it'll. I mean, something.
I'm that guy that kind of just gets frustrated, and I say, you know what, it's done. You know what I mean? So I'll get another one. It'll be like my 10th try at my own build. But when this H7 comes out, I'll try.
I don't know. It's just something. I don't know. You just learn a way, and then it's like baking. You know, baking has a set formula. You do things exactly a certain way, you're going to have this amazing cake or this amazing loaf of bread or whatever. But you try and add more flour, or you try and add more of this, or you try and change temperature, or you try and do all this other thing.
Yeah, if you mess with the chemistry, you F it up.
It's going to be very good.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. There's things I probably do that I don't necessarily even think to tell people to do. But you just do, once you figure out the thing, like I try and tell people the way they'll work 100% of the time. I mean, truthfully, you can do things other ways and maybe they'll work 90% of the time, but you're going to have that one quad it doesn't work on and you want to kill yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the problem. And it's like, just do this, please, just do this. And then people argue with me. It's like stupid things. Like people want to put the biggest pet peeve I have is people mounting stuff on the flight controller, right? You need to think of this flight controller as there's a guy with really super good hearing, right? His hearing is like the best you could ever imagine. Are you going to tape a fan to his head? It's going to drive the guy nuts, right?
I'm so guilty. I'm so guilty of this.
So all you got to do is mount it to the freaking frame. Keep it off the flight controller, and it'll work 1,000 times better. And yes, it may fly okay if you do it. 90% of the time, it may fly fine. But it's going to be that 10% of the time that's going to drive you nuts, and you're going to think our stuff sucks. And it's just like, don't do that. That's like, it's just not, you shouldn't do that. And it's silly that people still like the MPU 6000 gyro, which they've basically made obsolete. Like InvenSense canceled it a long time ago, and they're still making it just because they want this basically the gyro is equivalent to a guy like an 80-year-old man's hearing. Right? You won't even notice the fan attached to his head. And just because people want to attach the fan to the guy's head, like that's like when they could just put it on the floor nearby him to cool him or something, and that's the way you got to think of things. Like, again, do you want a Ferrari or do you want? I mean, I don't want to say a Ford because I love my Mustang, so it's not even a Ford. It's like a I don't know.
Go Kia. Go with Kia because Kia is like crap.
No, Kia was one of the best cars I had.
I hated my Kia. It was nothing but nightmare.
We went to buy my wife one, and we looked at Mercedes, BMW, and then we went to look at Kia, and Kia was like way better than Mercedes and BMW. Like it had 360-degree cameras all around.
You get everything for a hell of a lot less. Yes.
Yeah. Well, you couldn't get those features on the BMW and the Mercedes, and we're like, it was a no-brainer. My wife loved that car, so I can't say Kia's. I think Kia makes really cheap stuff and really good stuff, and if you buy the cheap stuff, there's no such thing as a really cheap Mercedes or BMW, I guess. But it's I don't know. I think when it comes to cars, most of the mainstream cars, you probably can find a really good one. I think Hyundai has that one car that they come to your house and pick it up and do maintenance and all kinds of a super expensive car.
What? That's ridiculous.
There's only very few dealers in the world that even sell them and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Well, and Hyundai is Kia, so.
Yeah, they're the same company. That's why I said that. Yeah.
So the Butcher wants to know if you have any patents on any of the F1 products.
It's not worth it because how do we stop China from cloning? We can't. Because like I said, their patent system out there is different. So, and what am I going to do? Start shutting down all these companies? So like for example, the gummies. I could patent the gummies, right? And I could serve every vendor with notice to stop selling any flight control with gummies. And then everyone in the hobby is going to hate me and think I'm the worst guy on the planet.
Yeah.
So
they'll come at you with pitchforks, you ruin their business.
Same thing with Betaflight features. I mean, there's stuff we've done that Betaflight does. They copied from us, and they can't. But what am I going to shut down Betaflight? Everyone in the world is going to hate us. What would be the advantage of doing that? People want we live in a time of Robin Hood. Everyone thinks they're poor and they want Robin Hood to steal from the rich and give it to them. And so, people are okay with the theft. If people weren't okay with the theft, they wouldn't buy stuff that's a direct clone of something else. and
It's the
I don't think
cheapest
everyone's
thing,
okay
right? No
with
one
it.
wants to spend the money on it. They want it
Yeah,
perfect, but for
literally,
as low cost.
if Vinny came to your house and offered you a TV that was stolen, but it's $200 cheaper, most people are gonna be like, sure. If they don't think they're gonna get caught, they're fine with it. And so the patents would be useless in our market. It's not big enough to be worth the money to even go after people. If we were like the size of DJI, yeah, it'd be worth it. But even DJI, I mean, they violated they're getting kicked out of the US for violating a patent.
Well, maybe not. Because didn't Microsoft sell them a bunch of patents to back themselves up so that now they have the ability to have these products?
No, I don't know, just recently, like last week, the court ruled in the patent holder's favor. I mean, they don't think they're actually going to get kicked out, but I think it's a matter of time before DJI gets pushed out of our country. I mean, they're owned by the Chinese government. I mean, not directly, but they're well funded by the Chinese government. Yeah. It's just like they're one of the Trump going on about China and stuff. Like they're a textbook example of all the stuff he's talking about. I just think there's not anyone else out there that's even close to their quality and everything else right now that it would make it hard to get rid of them because there's no one to fall in their place. But I think it's a matter of time before they're more scrutinized, and that might hurt all of us. I mean, they might put 100% tariffs on drones. It won't hurt us because we're going to make it in the U.S., so I guess it'll help us. But it would hurt
certain companies like TrueRC and you guys who are manufacturing in North America will do fine.
Yeah, TrueRC, I guess they're in Canada, right? And then yeah, I haven't talked to him much. I know Alex Grieve well, though. He makes them in the U.S. But yeah, I mean, there's a few companies that'll do it, and maybe some people pull them into the U.S. But I mean, honestly, no American company makes their stuff here and even makes their own stuff. So they're relying on engineers in China to create their stuff, even the designers.
That's really exciting. That really is.
Yeah. So I think to me it's cool that we're going to do stuff in the U.S. and we design the stuff ourselves. Like Dominic's in Europe. He's not in the United States, but he does a lot of our designs. So it's no one else, and we know no one can copy what we're doing, right? And we're actually working with other companies. I mean, I have a really lot of good friends in China, and we're willing to let them do designs. Like, I don't know if you know this about the H7 too. So even with Betaflight, it requires special software to make it work because of the way it works. So in order for anyone else to do an H7 board, they would need our software, or a very expensive H7 would be the only, and they'd have to write a bunch of code in Betaflight to support a different H7. So we pretty much have the market cornered on that stuff for now. And so without them doing a much more expensive version, like we're able to use, the reason we're able to do this is we got this budget H7 and that we're able to make work with software. So software is a big part of why this is possible.
I'm just seeing here, the butcher wants to know if the first batch will be manufactured in the U.S.
The very first ones out the door might not be, but the first batch part of it will be, if that makes sense. So whichever one gets ready first is the one that gets shipped out. Like, we're obviously not going to delay it if the U.S. is 2 weeks behind. But but the first batch of flight controllers overall, so we're making thousands and thousands of them. Like, part of those thousands will be made in the U.S. If that makes sense.
No, definitely makes sense. So earlier he asked a question as well about the warranty on your equipment. How does that exactly work?
So the first thing is we have a replacement plan right now. So if you're in a crash, right, we all hit a post and destroy our quad, you get a huge discount to replace that flight controller or that ESC. So the first thing, no matter what you do to your flight controller, you're going to get a huge discount. It's less than the resellers even pay to replace it. So basically, it sucks most of the profit out of it for us. So you can always do that. You can do that with any of our products, the motors, the frames. The frames have lifetime warranties for $5 shipping. Basically, you get places replaced with the frames, for example. And then there's going to be something else cool coming out on the H7 where we're going to even do more of more of a replacement plan type thing for that. So it'll be almost super cheap to get it replaced in the first, whatever 90 days or whatever we decide. We're working out the details of that now. But we're gonna we want to encourage the plug and playness, because the biggest problem we have right now too is you get an ESC from some other company, and then you get our flight controller, and you have to figure out how to wire it because they don't match up. And the biggest thing you can do to fry a flight controller is you put the power wire on one of the other wires, and that'll instantly fry the flight controller, right? So we get a flight controller, like we know this happens right away. They're like, oh, I've never even flown it, it's dead. And it's like, and we know the CPU's burned up, and we flash them from the factory. So they work from the factory, right? They have to work. They can't get flashed. So that's the number one way I see people kill them. And so, you know, if you get our ESC and our flight control, and I know it's tough to get our ESCs necessarily, but if you got our whole thing, we know that you have quality and you know it was done right. It's much easier for us to go, okay, you know, that died in the first month or whatever, we'll replace it essentially. And so we're trying to figure it out where we can make it so you don't have to, you know, suffer. And also, even if you crash it in the first X amount, you know, like what's cool about the GoPros with Best Buy is you go buy the replacement plan. And no matter what you do, you go back to Best Buy and they give you a new GoPro, right? And you just
every time
replacement plan. Yeah. So I think I want to do something like that. Like maybe it's $10 on a flight controller, and you know, the first 90 days, if no matter what happens, you get a new one. Something like that too.
Well, I mean, even for us in Canada, right, with the GoPro, Best Buy doesn't do that for us. So we have to buy GoPro Plus. And even for the Session 5, we're paying 80 something Canadian right now to get it replaced, and we're all willing to do it. So I'm sure that
I mean that's what's cool about Best Buy for us. I mean, it's so nice buying that replacement plan. The worst thing is like you didn't use it. Like you're like 2-3 years in and you're like, oh, I forgot to use it.
And then that one time you take it out.
So we want to do more of that stuff too. We've always been the head of the market in our warranties, right? Like we were the first one with the replacement plan. We're pretty much still the only one with the replacement plan. I think Rotoride tried some of that stuff, but I don't think they do it anymore.
They do on their motor, the blast.
Well, they canceled the motor ones.
They're doing it through them.
Come back.
They're doing it through them. I think they're just not doing it through certain stores.
Oh, so I know they canceled it, but they brought that back. Yeah. So
yeah.
But we were by far the first. Like when they came out the release, oh, we're the first one to do that. I'm like, we've been doing it for 4 years, guys. Like seriously. You know, we've always done that stuff, and we want to take it to the next level with this next one. And to be honest, we couldn't do it before because we're paying a middleman, right? So these things are pretty expensive to us. Now with the new flight controller, we control our costs, we control our manufacturing. It actually becomes a little cheaper. We can maybe do more of the stuff because we have more room to do more of the stuff. And so we're going to take the warranty hopefully to the next level with the new flight controller. So that's why we haven't opened up pre-order, because there's a lot of details we're trying to figure out the final stuff on. And there's also software issues that we want to make sure all work before we manufacture it as well. But those are all working too. So
nice.
Because we had this in our hands for quite a while.
I think people would rather you release a finished product versus being like, okay, here it is. Oh, but wait, no, you need to adjust it. Oh, now do this update, like you said, right? You're trying to.
Yeah, well, there's always going to be something you're going to have to do, so that's never going to go away. But yeah, I don't know. We just want to make sure it works, obviously. Like the ESCs, we had a bad batch of ESCs. Like they had problems, and we recalled every single one and repaired every single one to get rid of that problem. And other companies, which I won't name names, don't do that. They just like catch on fire. They know they're bad, and they just keep selling because they made 5,000 of them. They don't care. They just know people will buy them. They catch on fire, and they're going to buy the next one. And I can't sleep at night being that way. I mean, maybe we'd be better off if we're that way. And I think what those companies do too is maybe the people that shout the loudest, they'll give free ones too, right? They factor in a certain amount of people are going to be super annoying. They're going to give free ones to those guys, but everyone else is just going to get the shaft, and most people are not going to make a big fuss about it. And so we need to make sure that we have the ability to like if I send out 1,000 flight controllers and 1,000 flight controllers didn't work, we're going to fix them or replace them. And so we want to make sure
that'd be a bad day.
Yeah. Well, it was a bad day. I mean, the ESC, I hand fixed every single one. I had to replace the processor on every single one. And so
is that what that microscope is there for?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we do prototyping anyways, but yeah, that microscope helps with that kind of stuff. But I fixed every single one, and then some guys took forever to send them in, and we have a few left to do, I think, but not very many. But yeah, that we stood behind it, and very few companies do that. Like I think TBS does that. They're better about standing behind things, but we want to make sure it's pretty good. And we always know software is going to evolve, right? Software is going to change over time. Settings are going to change over time. So that's different. Anything we can fix in software, that's not that big a deal. But hardware is pretty hard to fix once you send it out to people.
So Where do you see FPV going in like the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you kind of envision it?
I think it's tough to say. I think we're going to, I don't know. I think the U.S. is going to try and push out foreign stuff, at least Chinese stuff. They're really hampering down on Chinese stuff. I think it's going to get harder to comply. Like this new FAA stuff, I don't know if everyone realizes it, but it would virtually destroy Betaflight. Because the FAA stuff basically says everything needs to be certified, so it can't be modified to not broadcast your position and stuff. So how would you do that with open source stuff? It'd be super easy to get around it. And I think we're going to see more stuff go that direction. I mean, what's nice about us is in the US, we're going to comply. So if we sold everyone a drone and every drone has to be certified, we'll certify every drone, right? We control the software. We can make sure they all comply. You kind of have a little warranty there with no matter what happens to the government, we're good to go. I think we're going to see a lot less of the clones out there in the future, a lot less of the companies, because these drones, people are being dangerous with them is the biggest thing things pushing this. You know, like when X-Class first came out, I'm like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. You're basically putting this death machine in the hands of just idiots. And when people realize that, it's going to kill our hobby. And I think that's the type of stuff that's killing our hobby. Like people are literally taking out power lines, like shutting down power on blocks with X-Class drones. Like
what?
Yeah, like there's videos on YouTube of people like taking out power lines with them. And I've watched, like I was out there with Sean when he was flying his X-Class, and he just cut through gates like they're not even there. Like what would that do to your leg? You know, it literally just cuts the gate in half. So they're dangerous, and I think what's nice is the sub 250 gram stuff. It looks like there's kind of like a loophole for that, and I think there should be, and I think we can still make really high performance stuff, quality stuff under sub 250 grams. But I think there's going to be some regulation for the other stuff, and I don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing, as long as they give us a decent path to comply. But if you did notice, DJI has been pushed out of the regulation for that. DJI is not on the advisory committee for the FAA stuff at all. So they're the biggest manufacturer of drones in the world, and they have no input on any of the FAA stuff. And I think that's kind of bad for us. And I think the problem is people are buying, Chinese-made drones. That's the #1 drone. So the U.S. doesn't want to give them any control of anything, so they're pushing them out. I think I don't know. I don't know if that's very good for the hobby. I think
it's a big rabbit hole.
Yeah, the problem is we're too small of a group. Like we want to be like, oh, don't put us in the same boat with those DJI users, but that's stupid. We're all in the same boat. And there's millions of them. If we got them worked up, they could control, they could make the government change their mind. We're not going to do it. We need the DJI guys to control the government. And so I don't think we should look at ourselves as different. We're all the same. And I don't know. I think it's scary. I don't know. What do you guys think? You think that's what's going to happen? Or?
I mean, honestly, based on what's been happening over in Hong Kong the last few days, I definitely think there's going to be a lot of scary changes happening very soon. I don't know where it's going. I don't want to be a doomsday person of like, but check the news because it's not being broadcast very publicly. And I actually found it by fluke on the internet today. So it's pretty crazy what they're doing over there.
Yeah,
and I think we might have more publicity of it because Trump is actively doing things and saying things, whereas our government hasn't said shit. So it's not in our news. It's not being shown to Canadians at all.
Yeah, I think that's why everyone likes Trump. I mean, I know people think he's crazy, but he just tells everyone everything. Like literally, I'll watch him in his things, and he does say some crazy things. He doesn't think before he speaks. We all know that. But that kind of makes me trust him more because I know he's just saying whatever's in his head. But his experts will be like, they'll be like, how many ventilators do you have? And people will be like, we have plenty of ventilators. And they'll be like, well, how many do you have? And they'll be like, well, he won't tell me a number. And then he'll be like, we have 73. Flat out, be like, we have 73 ventilators. And they're like trying to hide everything. And it's like, he's like, well, we have a few. We have in the 70s. Well, we have 73. So I think there's a good and a bad thing. Like to every other country, maybe people think we're run by this fool, but at the same time, at least everyone
honestly, it's all
stupid thought in his head.
Can
What's
somebody
that?
enlighten me?
It's all media perception. Like in Canada, I have not spoken to anyone in America, including families and friends who live there, that are against him. But the media says everyone hates him. So
Yeah, because he's really fast to be like, you're an asshole. I don't care. You're not even allowed in my news conferences. You know,
Yeah.
like CNN. What the fuck are you doing here, CNN? Just leave. I'm not going to answer any of your questions. Why are you even here? And it's like he doesn't play games. I mean, I don't necessarily think he's the best leader for this country, but you know, you got to take.
he's kind of an honest politician by fault.
Yeah, he's like I think he's not used to the honest politician, and that's why my
going on
problem
in Hong Kong?
is I'll say what's on my mind. In Hong Kong, the Chinese. So the way Hong Kong works is, we owned Hong Kong, then we gave it to Britain, and then Britain gave it back to China, essentially.
But they have to protect them until 2024.
Where they're supposed to be. It's like the same but different. So basically, they're the same country. They're China, but they're supposed to be governed separately. China's until 2000. I don't know what it is, 40 or
42
something.
or something.
Yeah.
I saw. Yeah.
So they're supposed to have their own government, right? And China's not supposed to. You know, it's not supposed to be like China government. They're their own government. Well, China's basically decided, nah, fuck that. We're just taking control now. And so there's tons of protests, and everyone's pouring in the streets protesting, and they're basically trying to just take over Hong Kong and make it part of China, which is bad for a lot of things because Hong Kong doesn't have the tariffs in place and everything as China. China's separate, right? We treat China as separate. Stuff that comes from China is different than stuff that comes from Hong Kong. So if Hong Kong just becomes China, that's going to destroy Hong Kong, right? Because all the businesses there are based on the fact that
and Trump has already announced that he will now be treating them the same as China. That announcement today, I think. And
I mean, God, you got to give him credit. I mean, we've had these treaties that don't really favor us in place for like 50 years, some of them. At some point, you just got to be like, this is stupid. You know, like it needs to be fair. And I don't know. I think he's like crazy, like a fox. Like,
would you say that you are the Trump of FPV? Because you are definitely the most vocal about like.
I'm not afraid to say what's on my mind, and that gets me in trouble. At the same time, I mean, it's like I'm not saying I'm the biggest Trump supporter. I'm not going to tell anyone who I support politically because that's like talking about religion with everyone. Yeah. But I just think that everyone has good things and bad things, and you need to realize that whoever's the president doesn't control the world, doesn't control our country. People seem to think like whoever's president is in control, but we have, 3 branches of government and all this other stuff. Like he's not in control. Like he can do his limited power. And that's what people just need to realize that, we're a representative government. We're not a dictatorship.
Truth.
So you can't blame stuff on him. And people complain about how we handled the virus stuff. But I mean, look at our economy. It's not tanked. Our economy should be tanked right now.
True.
Yeah, like the fact that he's like, oh, there's this new drug, what is that new drug? The drug that he always pushes. I don't know.
I can't remember the name of it. It's hydroxychloroquine or something. Yeah. Not quite.
Yeah. He's like, oh, it's an awesome treatment. And, even if he thought it wasn't, or even if he thought it was, I mean, he's just thinking it's possible that it would be it. And so he's trying to hype them up. He's trying to make people feel safe. He's trying to make them see light at the end of the tunnel. He's trying to people think we're not fucked. Right. And so what that does is keeps our stock market better. Every time something bad happens and we think we're fucked, he comes out and it's just like, oh, blah, blah, blah. What about this great thing? And I guess I probably do the same thing in FPV, right? Like I want to hype people up. I want to get people excited. And I tell people what I believe. Right. And maybe you don't agree with my beliefs and people don't agree with Trump's beliefs. But at very least, you go to bed feeling happy. Right? You go to bed not being so worried, not being so fucked. And they say if you think of Trump as an economic president, if you think about his primary focus is the economy, his decisions make sense. And that's the one thing we can say. I mean, our economy is not tanked right now. Like that's amazing. The fact that
our gas prices
are tanked right now. Yeah. We don't get good cheap gas in Arizona for some reason. We still get.
We're not. In Canada, dude, they're literally dumping oil because they have nowhere to put it, and somehow our gas has gone back up to almost what we were paying before. Like, explain that.
Yeah, it's so weird. Yeah, in Arizona, we're still paying like $2.50 a gallon. Like, what? Like,
the taxes. It's taxes and shit that they pile on.
No, but ordinarily, Arizona is the cheapest. Versus other states, we're usually pretty cheap, but they just haven't changed. There's the same prices. But like, I don't know, like give an example for Trump, like, you know, when the oil got cheap, what did he do? The first thing he did is bought a bunch of it and put it in our oil reserves and stopped our production. It's like, you know, like you got to think of it as an economic president. And I don't know how we got talking about this, but I think that's one thing, you know, he has done good, and it takes a bullshit salesman, I guess, to sell things, right? Like most salesmen,
you need snake oil.
Easy. Yeah.
The irony is Jake and I both work in sales, so
you only tell the good things. You don't tell the bad things. You know, you're not going to go to a guy and be like, it's probably going to break down in 3 years. You're going to be like, it's the best driving car ever. I love driving it. You know, you're not going to.
Negative stuff people aren't going to buy. You can't go in and say like this flight controller.
You can say one negative thing. Right. If you say one negative thing, that's all people concentrate on. There could be 100 good things, and you said one bad thing, and all people heard was that bad thing. Yeah. And so a good sales guy knows to tell the person the things they want to hear. You know, if you're into fast cars, you're going to talk about how fast the car goes. If you're into hauling a lot of stuff, you're going to talk about how much stuff the car can haul. And I think in that case, that's what Trump's good at is selling, you know, a good picture for our economy. And I think I'm hopefully good at selling a good flight controller, and in that way,
right.
I think listen, we try and make the best things on the planet. We have the best guys working with us. Dominic is by far the best at what he does. You know, Nick studied drones in school. He's learning code and knows all of the physics and stuff behind him. Like, if you ask me, I'm an expert on all this stuff. Like, I know how drones fly better than most people. You know, my son's now learned all this coding stuff. He's learned from me. He's been an amazing coder. Like, we get the best people to try and make the best stuff. But on top of that, you know, we're good at telling people what's good about it. And that's, people don't know. They don't know unless you tell them, right? You know, and so I think that's part of the problem with the hobby is a lot of times we get the same regurgitated stuff over and over because people don't really know the difference. So that's kind of like what we're trying to do. We're trying to
well, and a lot of people trust their friends and their friends' opinions. And I mean, even like I was flying Betaflight because everyone I knew was flying Betaflight. Now people are going to Emu Flight and they're trying to drag you there. And then so everyone kind of, my friend's doing this, it works, I'm going to do that. And you kind of get that grouping without actually investigating themselves or determining what they feel is the better product.
Yeah, and it's hard. Like, you go to Get FPV or you go to Pyroflip, you go to Race Day Quads, and you go to their page for flight controllers, and there's 8,000 flight controllers there. Why? Like, it's bad for our hobby. It's bad for these companies. The people go there, they don't know what to buy. They don't know what the difference is. They don't know what to trust. Like, why are we giving so much, so much choice to people? Because all it does is the person has a bad experience and they never come back.
Oh, like me, I will never buy a Lux F7 micro board ever again, and I will never advise anybody to buy one either.
Yeah, and it's just like, for all you know, you bought one just bad one, for example. You know, who knows? And you've made that decision. But you know, like, but the way they do things, and I talked to the CFO recently from Lumineer, Get FPV recently, and they're going to stop doing that supposedly. Like they have all these hundreds of vendors, and they're supposedly coming down to just a few, which they can concentrate on, which I think is the best thing ever. Like, that's what you need to do, right? But I don't know. I think Rotaride's probably doing decent because they're more doing that. They're only selling core stuff, and it's hard to control stock. It's hard to control whatever. I think these guys are trying to be the Walmart of FPV, but if you go to Walmart, they don't do that either. I mean, they might have 50 types of cereal because cereal tastes different, but they don't carry 50 brands of towels and 50 brands of I don't know, glasses and 50.
Why have I never thought of it like that?
Yeah, I don't know, but yeah. So I think that's part of the problem with our hobby too. People have such bad experiences because they don't buy stuff and things don't work together, right? Like, if you give people, you can buy any motor, you can buy any flight controller, you can buy any ESC. People think they're all the same. And I mean, I give you an example. Our motors, for example, when we came out with the Willy motors, okay, I'm good friends with the factory that makes them. So we worked together and made the best motor on the planet. And we didn't tell everyone why it's the best motor on the planet. And the reason is because the minute you tell people, everyone copies it, right? So our Willy motor was the first to have vibration-mounted bearings. So what that meant is way less vibration got into your frame and your flight controller, right? So that made them fly far superior. It was the first motor, I think, to have a solid one-piece bell. Not only does that make it stronger, but it also absorbs all the heat. So their motor can handle more heat. It was like one of the first motors to have super high temperature wire and bigger wire. And what that let it do is handle more heat and less likely to burn up and cause problems. Like there's so many new things, first things we did on that motor, but people just look at that motor and we're selling it for $26. And other people are selling this other motor for $26 that cost $4 to make. And ours maybe costs $14 to make, right? So you're going to way better deal with our motor, but people just don't know what to buy. They don't know what the difference is. When you have 500 motors on there and they all look the same, like how do you know what to buy? And I think it would be, and that's what hobby shops used to do, right? Like the hobby shops used to be able to go in there and they'll be able to tell you the differences and why buying this over something else. But now the hobby shops are gone, and we basically have the Walmarts of FPV right now that but not even the Walmarts that are smart enough to like have a variety when that matters, right? Yeah. Like different 100 types of cereal because they all taste different, but you don't need the 100 types of glasses because it's a glass. And honestly, what's the difference? They
all hold milk.
Yeah, like hopefully our hobby will get to the point where, they work with good brands. Like, you can count on them just not being some clone brand. And it's frustrating to me to watch, like every week there's a new brand popping up and they're selling their stuff. And the only thing you can buy it based on is a picture on the screen, right? You don't know what it's going to be like. So I don't know. You don't know where FPV is going. I hope it's going to a place where more stuff is higher quality.
Does RCN Power make those motors?
Yeah, RCN Power is the factory that makes it.
Okay.
But so here's what people need to understand. Like I said, I know him well. Good friends with him. We're the first to get anything, right? And I tell him like, hey, let's do this or let's do this. And so when that happens, we're the only ones to have it, right? So where the outside may look different, it's the same. I mean, between two motors, the insides are different. And people don't realize that. Like there's like for example, Samsung manufacturers, at least used to manufacture almost the entire iPhone. So you're telling me if you bought a Samsung Android phone, it was the same as an iPhone? No, it was completely different. Yeah. Just because one company manufactures it, that's all they are. Like they're manufacturing according to Apple specifications and using their technology. Yeah. So just because, RCN Power makes it, so any motor RCN Power makes is going to be the same. That's not how it works. And people don't seem to understand that. And so they think they found like a bargain because they're so used to in China, you can find like the same flight controller with not necessarily flight controllers, but let's use like, I don't know, like a basket you put bread in. That basket is sold by 50 different vendors. It's made at the same factory, but there's 50 different names. You go on AliExpress, you're going to find 50 different vendors. So you're just going to find the cheapest one because all the baskets are the same. They're made at the same place. And people tend to think that with FPV products. They think all motors are the same. They think all flight controllers are the same. And they're not. These are like well-engineered things. Like just the way a trace width is or how a trace is run or where it's run makes a big difference. Just the layout of the board makes a big difference on the noise getting to the gyro. There's all kinds of things that makes a big difference, and we're not going to tell people. So like you might get that Lux F7. I don't know. I know the first Lux, for example.
I will not get that thing.
Well, the first Lux used a 6500 gyro, right? Which is a much better gyro than a 6000 gyro. But the way they built it made it shit, right? The way it was, they didn't have gummies, the way it was laid out, the position, the electrical characteristics made it terrible. So now everyone knows that 6500 gyro as being shit because one board had it, it was done shitty. So no one ever wants a board with that gyro on it. And that's something to keep in mind. Like our stuff is, I think it's well engineered. Our Revolt V3, our Revolt with the solder pads, it's on like version 12. We don't tell you it's on version 12 because we don't want you to have version 11 and be like, oh, this is outdated. But if we find a way to make something better, we make it better. We test, we make it better. Every time we do a new batch, hey, we can make this little tweak. Like we get some user feedback. We see people maybe mess up doing this thing, or we see this could be a little better. This could be a little. We make it better. That's one thing you can count on us. Like we re-engineer things. I mean, we're already on like version 3 of our extreme ESC. Because we figured ways to tweak it and make it better. And we're going to keep making it better every time. And don't wait for the best thing. I mean, if you're always waiting for the best thing, you're never going to buy anything, right? But at least you can count on whatever you're buying at that moment is the best it can be at that moment. And we're going to always make things better and better and get them better and better.
Actually, the Newzo had a good point here. There we go.
The problem with this is exactly what I just said. So every board is made differently. Every board is not necessarily done well. So if you're Betaflight and there's two problems. So the first thing is you're Betaflight and you overfilter and you run slower and you do all those other things. It'll work okay on the majority of boards. But with the other case, if we can't control the hardware, we can't control how well it flies, right? And then the other thing is doing targets with a lot of boards takes a lot of time. So if we're, only sell 3 copies of this one flight controller software for this one board, but we spent a week making it work, we don't make our money back there either. So we want to control the hardware as much as possible. When the new H7 comes out, maybe we'll release more targets. If there's like hundreds of people that want to target for something, maybe we'll do it. But part of what makes us run so well is our hardware. And that's, you can't just put the software on a Ferrari, on a Ford from a Ferrari, and it's going to drive the same as a Ferrari. There's multiple things to take into account. And one thing is our main flight controller, we want to fly the best it can. We release more F411 boards because we didn't have anything in that market. And to be honest, they don't fly according to my standards. They fly kind of shitty. But they fly better than Betaflight on those things. So it's the best.
I don't know. I just flew Mark's little cube thing
while
he was here. And I've never wanted a toothpick so bad.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, we still fly better than the competition, right, on those boards. But I just know, like, I'll tell you a secret. We're going to have an H7 all-in-one, okay? We found this little teeny H7 that we can now use and make an all-in-one. That thing's going to be insane, right? It's going to fly amazing. So, but it takes time and testing before we get to there. So it's something we're working on.
Seeing your excitement right there just kind of told me.
We know we can make it better, right? But right now we know it's not coming out next week or next month. So it was okay in that category to just make mediocre stuff. And what's nice about that category is everyone steals everyone's design. So literally, I think we had to support Diatone and Maytech. We're the only 2 formats we had to support. Everyone's boards was either a Maytech or a Diatone. So it was not that much work. 2 targets is all we need to support. Because of our auto-detecting things. Like, they may rearrange things, the gyro may be at a different angle or whatever, but all that, we auto-detect all that stuff, right? So you don't have to know any of that stuff. So the targets might be different for Betaflight, but realistically for us, they were all the same. So it was easy to do. So it was kind of a no-brainer. And we were working with Diatone at the time. And we already made theirs work. So we're like, we'll make Maytech work too. I mean, hopefully we're going to be working with some of these other companies and hopefully have their products come. The Diatone stuff kind of was rocky. Like you said, Mark's flew amazing, right? It didn't catch on fire. Didn't have any issues.
Oh, it was great.
Yeah, and mine's fly amazing.
I only fly Mamba stacks currently, and like I have an Diatone stack I haven't even put in my drone yet, but I've had one problem in almost a year.
Yeah.
Running in multiple.
Then we go through, like, I don't know if it's a batch thing or what, but we'll go through having a bunch of people with issues. I don't know if, like, I race with Sean Taylor all the time. He has a bunch of those ones like Mark has, and 0 issues. We all have 0 issues with them, but then we'll have people that have issues, and then we get blamed.
Yeah, it's a quality control issue.
Yeah, like Bardwell had one and it caught on fire, and he hit a tree and then hit the ground. So yeah, it caught on fire. But we got blamed. Like, he's like, oh, just like Flight 1, it catches on fire. And like, no, like, that's stupid. Like, why are we getting blamed for a hardware issue? And so that's part of it too. We want to release our board so we know we don't have issues. I mean, I would say our ESCs have virtually no issues now. Our flight controllers have virtually no issues. The only issues we see are people either crashing really hard or trying to use something else with our stuff and wiring it wrong, or it's poor quality. Like, we just had a thread on our group where an ESC called on fire. And the guy's like, I want to know if the software did. And people are like, no, of course the software didn't do it. Like, those ESCs have issues.
You have an automatic, like, fail-safe thing. Like, okay, if they've flown this many packs, you must implode so that they have to buy new products.
Yeah, I don't know why people have our stuff. I mean, I see they're talking about the channel. They've had it since the start and never had an issue. And I wouldn't put out stuff if it had issues. Like there's just, it's silly. Like, yeah, first batch could have potential problems, but like I said, we'll correct it immediately if they do, and we'll stand behind stuff if it does like when we did the recall on our ESCs.
So where do people find like compatibility listings and stuff like that? Where would you like people to look for all this information?
Well, like in theory, everything should be compatible, right? I can't control our company's quality. So I think it comes down to that. Like, I'll give you an example. We did the DR1 series, what was that, 2 years ago? And I was physically at the DR1 series, right? And we were in Europe for like a month and a half. And it was like 6 races during that month and a half or something like that. Well, I watched one team. They started with 100 ESCs, okay? I think at the end of the series, they had 6 ESCs left.
Wow.
Like 94 ESCs caught on fire or something crazy like that, right? We had no ESCs catch on fire the entire series. We were on our same, like the only ESCs we lost were very few of them. It was like literally, they were metal gates going into a metal gate at 130 miles an hour, like literally. So that company that those ESCs caught on fire, like I know they kept selling those fire ESCs for months after that. Like they knew they had issues. They kept selling them. All the racers knew they had issues. I'm sure if you ask a racer, they'll be able to tell you what the brand is. But they kept selling. They just kept selling till they were gone. And then so the next batch, maybe they corrected it, but now I hear they have issues again. So I don't know. But we can't control that quality, so we can't be. It's not our fault if it catches fire. Like we're higher performance stuff too. So we're going to push it a little harder. Like our stuff is more locked in. It's more in control. If you have an inferior product, you're more likely to see a problem using our stuff, I think is what it is too. And we ran at this too. BL Heli 32 needs higher quality hardware. BL Heli S could get away with lower quality hardware. I think maybe there's more performance there. So when we first released our BL Heli 32, it definitely wasn't as solid. We had to upgrade our components. Like we're used to putting 25 volt capacitors on our ESCs at the time. I think we put 50 volt capacitors on there now because of the noise BL Heli 32 generated. It couldn't handle lower voltage capacitors. And those are things you only know once you get in the wild and people start flying them, because you don't see them in testing, right? You need thousands of packs in hardware to really see problems. But you need to do smaller batches in the beginning, which we do, which is why we don't flood with all this hardware. And you need to have real world testing and be willing to stand behind stuff and change stuff quickly. Like if you just think your ESC is amazing and do 5,000 of them immediately, you're stuck. If there's a problem, what do you do at that point?
So Preston, to be honest with you, I've never had my own personal good experience with Flight One stuff. So you have come through and talked, and I hate to say it, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to buy more Flight One stuff, and I'll even wait for the H7 as well. But I'm definitely going to follow any instructions that you specifically tell me to go with.
I guarantee, if you follow my instructions, you won't have issues.
Okay.
Like stop handing stuff to your flight controller, Jake.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you right now. Like, here's what everyone should do. I don't care what flight controller or what ESC you're using. I'll tell you the things to do. If you have gummies, don't use standoffs. Don't use nuts. Use just a long M3 screw, like a 20 millimeter M3 screw. Okay. Make sure there's room between the ESC and the flight controller. Right? Don't put them too close, because what people don't realize is when you hit something, momentum goes somewhere. Right? So our cars are designed when you hit a brick wall to crumple, because that absorbs the impact. Well, what's happening is when you hit something with your drone, those things are going to compress at a really high speed. So you need some room for when they compress so they don't touch, because your ESC has all this electrical, like positive and negative, is just sitting out there on top of these caps. They're fully conductive. If a piece of metal touches a cap, it fries immediately, right?
In there,
like
done there.
Yeah, it's literally a negative and a positive on both sides, right, of that little teeny cap. It's so easy to fry. An ESC is so easy to fry. So give yourself some room. The other thing is don't solder over your ESC. Like tape off your ESC when you're soldering. So if you look at your soldering under a microscope when you're done, you'll see all these tiny little solder blobs everywhere that you'll only see with a microscope. And what happens is those move around while you're flying. They go things. So mount with the M3 screws. Give it some space. Tape off the shit when you're soldering, and then use some masking tape. Then pull it off when you're done. Don't mount anything on your flight controller. These flight controllers where they're mounting the receiver directly to them is stupid. I don't know, or the VTX on them is stupid. I don't know if you know this. Like I know Tony from Immersion well. Their PCBs literally have special resin in them to like kill the EMF, right? They actually are blocking the EMF. Your flight controller does not have that stuff in there. So when you're putting something directly on that flight controller, you're putting EMF in all your circuit. Like your flight controller is one big antenna. All those traces act as one big antenna. So give it a little space. EMF dissipates over space, right? You can't have stuff too close. Like if we see certified our drones, they would never pass because there's too much interference. And the ESC creates a ton of interference. So that's why a little space between the ESC and flight controller. So just think of that flight controller as like a prissy girl who wants to be put on the pedestal and leave her alone. Like if you just treat her like a princess, that flight controller like a little princess, your quad is going to fly amazing. Like that's literally what you need to do. So put your VTX on the top plate, put your receiver on the top plate, or just put it away from it, and have a little space there, and use one long screw. Don't put nuts on the stack. It should fly amazing. Like I've never seen a build done like that didn't fly well. Oh, and don't put wires like where they scratch on the flight controller either, too, because it goes back to that guy with really good hearing. If you're scratching on his ear, you're going to drive him nuts.
Right.
So what do you think when like Lanuzzo's saying like metal screws through a board isn't smart? Is it kind of just like, listen, I have more experience.
I don't know why he thinks it wouldn't be smart. Because you have, so first of all, there's no copper traces inside our holes, right? So there's no chance of anything shorting. The copper is not connected to the ground plane or anything. Secondly, you have a gummy that's vibration dampening everything, right? That screw can move, right? So even if the screw gets bent, the gummy is going to take the bentness away, right? Like it's never going to bend. And your screw is super strong, so it's more likely not going to get bent. So that's by far the best way to do. Now think about this. If I have a plastic standoff or a plastic screw and I crash into a bush, that screw breaks, what's going to happen? It's going to touch the ESC and it's going to fry.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly what I just said will happen. That impact's going to go somewhere. It's going to make things touch. So you need something strong, keeping those two guys away. Think of the ESC and the flight controllers. They hate each other. They can't stand each other. You need to keep them apart. And so that's why using a screw is important, because it keeps them apart. It keeps them in their own lane. It keeps them away from each other. And that will keep your stuff like lasting longer. The other thing I like to do too, normal people, one thing I see that people do a lot wrong is they try and make their drone too pretty, and they solder wires where like they go inside the ESC. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like they solder on the pad, but the wire goes in the middle instead of out. So what happens is they mess up. They get solder blobs underneath the wires, and they don't even know they're there.
I'm like, this is probably a horrible example, and I'm a noob, so I don't care. But like, are you talking about like that? Like how I've tucked, like it's soldered up here, and then the wires are all getting tucked.
I can't really tell what direction you're going, but I think yours are going right. Aren't your wires going out? Like which way?
Yeah, mine are going. So they're coming this way. From like
I think yours are right. See, if you did the way I'm talking about, you see how you see all your silver pads? Yeah. You wouldn't be able to see them. They're covered up. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't know.
They did it kind of on the bottom and then had the wires.
Yeah. Well, it's like they wrap in. I can't tell if yours does it or not because you got a potato camera. But
I do have a potato camera. I'm working on it.
you need to be able to do this. Look.
I know. Trust me. All the cameras are sold out right now. Like
here, I'll show you on my little camera. I don't know if I have a drone up here, but like, so like on this ESC, I think it's focusing maybe.
Yeah, and I'm gonna make you full screen so that everyone can see.
You want the wires to go like out this way, right? Mm-hmm. Not in. Like people put them in and they cover up.
I get you. Okay.
So you don't see your mistakes is the biggest reason why not to do that. Not only that, but you're getting interference. Remember, these wires are pulsing electrical signals like crazy. So when you run them over the inside of the flight controller, you're like putting EMF into the flight controller like this. So that's why you don't want to do that stuff, is because it like gets interference away. Like you want the interference to go away as fast as possible, right? So not putting it those things that are broadcasting, those are like broadcasting EMF interference. You keep them away. And I don't know. I mean, there's just little things, like all these things add up. Like maybe they, maybe just each one adds a 1% chance of failure, or 1% chance of your quad flying improperly. But they add up. So if you do enough of them right, you're more than likely going to have a really good flying quad. And I don't know, maybe we need to create a little checklist, like, did you do this, or did you do this, or did you do this?
I think it'd be cool if every time someone buys a board, there's like a little checklist of like to do or to not do, like do not, warnings.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've definitely done videos many times on how to mount a flight controller. Like literally just watch one of those videos, which is probably like 5 minutes long, and you'll be educated. But everyone, like you're probably been in this hobby for a while, and you're like, I know what I'm doing. And it's like, the difference between you and me is, okay, if I was just sitting in my basement building my own drones, and I only have my own experience, and I've built, let's say, 20 drones in my lifetime, I've had 20 drones worth of experience, right? And that may seem like a lot, but I have thousands and thousands and thousands of users and thousands of users worth of feedback that we've seen. And so our recommendations are based on this huge sampling of people and builds we've seen. So we have the advantage of being able to see everyone's mistakes, so maybe we can be less likely to make them or steer people away from them. And it's just like, like simple things that just you wouldn't think, like, and like I said, it adds up. Like maybe you can build the crappiest quad ever and it's going to fly great. That's possible. But just the more things you can do, the more likely you're not going to be pulling your hair out because you're having a problem flying the drone. And people like, oh, my drone's flying crappy. How do I adjust the filters? And my answer always is, if you need to adjust our filters, then there's something wrong with your build. Let's figure that out first. Because you're going to be happier if you don't need to just filter all that information out. It's going to fly better. And so that's what we try and concentrate on, is good builds. And yeah, I mean, we could crank the filters like crazy. And with the H7, honestly, we have AI filtering. We're going to be able to do more of that stuff over filtered automatically. But we're going to be able to report back that we're having to do it, which is cool. So it'll be like, your noise profile. And one of the things we're coming out with is it'll run a test on your drone immediately and tell you your noise profile. So it'll tell you if there's problems with your build before you even go fly it. It'll run the motor tests and things on the motors, and it'll tell you if there's problems. And motors break down over time, and so you'll be able to identify which motors is bad and be like, hey, this one I might want to replace, or maybe this arm's going bad in the drone, or stuff like that. Like there's all kinds of cool things we're going to be able to do. That is what the H7 is going to make it easier for. And yeah, maybe we could do some of these things for the F4 too, but there's a lot of things that need more power to do it.
So this is going to be the last question. Scarecrow says, real talk, what's the first thing you adjust when you get prop wash on the on anything, I guess, Flight 1?
Well, so basically, I don't know. Usually prop wash is caused by filtering. So it's over filtered. So usually I try and lower the filters. But if one of our tunes doesn't work well, if you can't get a tune that has no prop wash really, I mean, the only thing I would say is all our tunes have a D filter. Well, I don't know. Some of them should. So our D is almost always over filtered. So you want to filter it a little less. But if you can't find a tune that works on your quad, I try and figure out why they won't work physically. Like I said, all my drones pretty much work with all the built-in tunes. The H7 is going to be a little different. We're going to have to find all new tunes for that probably, because it's so much faster that it actually, the PIDs are more reactive and stuff, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So there'll be a little bit of a learning curve maybe for everyone at the beginning, but then we'll get those all dialed in. You'll have all these choices. But that's why we add so many tunes. Like there's a lid for every pot. So hopefully there's a tune for every drone in Flight 1. And you shouldn't have to ever manually tune. It's so rare that you should have to manually tune. Just go in there and try all the presets till you find the one that works. And when you first change to a preset, fly it line of sight, like arm it line of sight and hover it before you put in your goggles. Because you may think you don't have much latency in your goggles, but when you have a flyaway quad, you'll realize how latent your goggles are. Like they'll be halfway across the field before you can disarm. But line of sight, you'll hit it within 2 feet of it going out of control. So that's my advice as well.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and giving us about 2 hours of your time here, which is crazy. It definitely went really fast, but I think a lot of us learned a shitload of knowledge from you. So thank you. And hopefully people will start looking at your site a little more. I've put a link in the description below So if anyone isn't sure or you want to look at some of the stuff we've been talking about, I also saw you guys have some really good, helpful stuff on the column on the right. I don't know, Jake can't, yeah, he can maybe zoom in there. So lots of things for people to look at. And also you have the Facebook group where I see you guys offer a lot of help.
Yeah, and something someone just asked that I can answer real quick is they said, can I get a Willy motor not in pink? Our like new motors, the candy-coated ones, are all the Willy tech. They're slightly bigger than the Willy ones, but they're pretty much a Willy motor in different colors with slight improvements. They're slightly bigger, a little more power. But yeah, if you click on the motors, the ones we have, yeah, have that. And we'll see with the new H7, we're going to get a big update on the website too. So.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Preston, for coming on. And thank you, everyone who's been watching for the whole thing. Pretty much all of you guys stayed through the whole show. So thank you, thank you, thank you. If there's any other questions, I'm sure Preston is willing to talk to you guys, post it in their group and see, or someone else will help you, I'm sure. Do you have any last things you want to say, Preston?
No, I think that's about everything. If you guys can hit me up. If you hit me up on Facebook and I don't respond right away, you just hit me up again, because I get hundreds of messages a day. But I try and be really active in the group and respond to anything I see as well. So if you have any questions, just go ahead and hit me up. Perfect.
Well, thank you, everyone. Stay safe and join us next week with Elbow FPV, who is also the founder / I guess main guy for Project Zen. So some of you will know who that is, but the rest of you will learn next week. Have a good one, everyone. Stay safe.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
See ya.